We are Red Group, and we are studying the effects of COVID restrictions on physical activity levels among college students. My name is Roland Ibarra.
My name is Tahira Khalfani-Bey.
My name is Maya Ortega.
And my name is Vina Orola.
And my name is Serena Tai.
The year 2020 will be a memorable year for most as the world was put at a standstill due to a global pandemic known as the coronavirus or COVID-19. This pandemic slowly shut the world down for over a year, and still things are not the same, nor will we know if it ever will be. During this pandemic, many lost their jobs and even homes as there was no source of income. Due to the loss of jobs and people quarantining, many people were affected by this pandemic in socioeconomic and sociocultural ways. As people were being sheltered at home and unable to do outdoor activities such as exercising, this took a major toll on many people's physical health. With this, it is important to study the social factors that may be hindered by COVID-19 in order to create preventative measures for the future. As almost everyone in the world has been affected by this pandemic, students from San Francisco State University have created a study targeting college students to analyze socioeconomic factors of COVID-19 and its effect on physical health. Due to the pandemic and school being online for the past year, this study will be conducted remotely and will be using participants from San Francisco State Kinesiology Department. Our overall aim is to observe how the repercussions of COVID-19 has affected the physical activity of students from San Francisco State.
Before we continue, we should take a look at the constraint factors to provide context for our study. For individual constraints, lower levels of fitness are possibly correlated to higher levels of anxiety and depression. This was found from a study conducted by Antonunes et al. 2020, who found that inactive adults between the ages of 18 and 34 displayed greater depressive symptoms than the same age group with higher or greater levels of fitness. Again, this study was conducted during quarantine. Environmental constraints, the impact of quarantine, fitness facilities shutting down, stay-at-home orders, and remote learning. More people opted to stay indoors rather than exercise outside. However, 80% of those that stayed at home reported less than 30 minutes of exercise a day. This was found in a study conducted by Fancourt, Boo, Mack, Stepento in 2020. And finally, task constraints, less exercise equipment available. More people are ordering exercise equipment for their at-home gyms to compensate for the closed-air gyms, but this also means that less equipment is available for the public since they're being bought out.
So for the methods, we had 55 students, all from San Francisco State. They're all a part of the kinesiology department and between the ages of 19 and 24. This research was conducted using 28 survey questions regarding the social, cultural, and economic statuses of the students and how COVID-19 has affected them. It also asked questions that compared their exercise habits pre and post-COVID. The sign up for the survey was completely voluntary. An email was sent out to professors in the kinesiology department and then sent out to students once they've consented. The survey took between 15 and 20 minutes. For the materials used, we use Qualtrics to generate the survey questions, and we use Google Docs to collaborate as a group.
Now with results, we focused on our 3 subtopics. The first one was environmental constraints, in which we asked our participants a series of questions. The first one being, who do you live with? In which 72.41% answered living with family, 24.14% living with roommates, and the final 3.45% living alone. The second question was, are you currently employed? In which 58.62% answered yes, and 41.38% answered no. Going in depth with our previous question, we also asked, how physically active is your job on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. 25% answered with 1 being the lowest, 17.86% answered that their job was ranked number 2, 21.43% of participants answered with a grading of 3, 23.21% of participants answered with a grading of 4, and lastly, 12.5% of participants answered with a grading of 5. Our final question was, does your neighborhood have access to a workout space, such as a park, a gym, a public track, or more? in which 86.21% answered yes and 13.79% answered no. Our next subtopic was socio-cultural constraints, in which we focused on areas of living with regards to the type of physical activity they performed in their neighborhood and how frequent they worked out a week. So with this, we started off with the question of how would you describe the area you live in? 49.12% answered that they lived in urban communities, 45.61% answered that they live in suburban communities, and the final 5.26% answered that they lived in rural communities. Now, with regards to the pandemic and what kind of physical activity they performed, we found that majority of participants engaged in strength training and walking/hiking as their preferred choice of physical activity prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas in terms of how frequent they worked out, we found that majority of participants worked out somewhere between 3 to 5 days a week. Lastly, we focus on socioeconomic constraints, in which we asked our participants with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, have they ordered any in-home exercise equipment both prior and during to the pandemic? With prior to COVID-19, we found that 72.41% of our participants reported that they did not purchase any in-home exercise equipment. Whereas during COVID-19 pandemic, we found that 72.41% of our participants reported that they did purchase any type of in-home equipment. This showed a 44.82% difference incline trend between before and during COVID-19 pandemic, which meant that people were buying more in-home exercise equipment as a cause of the COVID-19 pandemic.
With the results, we were able to identify the effects of COVID restrictions on physical activity levels among college students in regards to the three subtopics our group focused on. The results showed that most participants are living in houses with other family members, thus resulting in the possibility of having limited access to personal space to work out. Because of shelter in place, individuals who stated that their neighborhood has access to a workout space were still forced to stay home during the first few months of the COVID-19 pandemic. We also found that due to the shelter-in-place ordinances, majority of individuals have also had their hours reduced, therefore possibly affecting their socioeconomic status. However, despite having reduced hours of work, individuals stated that they had purchased more in-home exercises equipment. This resulted in students performing physical activity in a much more limited space, like for example, their homes, compared to working out in bigger spaces such as gyms or outdoors. Overall findings show that individuals have stated that they are working out much less due to the circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic.